Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada, with episode number 106 of the Yakking Show. This is the show for awakening you to new perspectives for surviving in the changing world we find ourselves in. If you like our show, we'd ask you to subscribe to the channel you're watching or listening on. And that will help us get our guests more exposure. And you might be a guest one day and you need the exposure. So please, if you like the show, and you won't miss the next episode by doing that. As always, we have interesting guests for you. Today is no exception, but it's not my job to introduce our guest. Kathleen does it so much better than I do. So let me welcome my co-host, Kathleen Beauvais in Waterloo. How are you today, Kathleen?
I'm doing great, Peter, and the sun is shining right now, so I'm taking it all in. It's a wonderful day. Thank you so much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate you, and we love reading your comments, so do please keep those coming. And if anyone out there is interested in being a guest on our show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today, and I'm really excited to have her on. Please welcome to the show, Heather Odendaal. Hello, Heather. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Kathleen. Thank you for having me today.
Now, you are the co-founder of WNorth. It's a global organization dedicated to the development of women in mid-career on a trajectory towards senior executive leadership. Can you please tell our audience a little bit about your background and explain what WNorth is and what made you decide to start this organization?
Wonderful. Well, yeah, so I guess I could go back to the beginning of WNorth. I was working for a Fortune 500 company in a mid-level position, and I was really looking to elevate my leadership skills. I was driven, I was ambitious, I had big visions, and I went seeking a community or an organization or a conference that I could go and find like-minded leaders and get the leadership development that was necessary to get that next promotion. And I wasn't successful in finding a space for that kind of mid-level. There was a lot of programs aimed at entry-level positions, and there were a lot of programs aimed at very senior women. And so in 2015, I started the WNorth conference. That was my first foray into this space. And the conference happened annually. It still does when it's safe to do so in Whistler, and brought together women from across North America who are in senior manager, director, and VP level positions and scaling entrepreneurs. And we brought in inspiring speakers, workshops, and continue to do development workshops now online. So we have evolved from just the conference. And for 3 years now, we've had a global online membership serving women who wish to develop their leadership skills and to connect with other like-minded leaders. Because one of the things that we do know is that the higher you get up, the lonelier it gets for women. And so in some of the cases, our members are in fairly male-dominated sectors, and they're just looking for peers to connect with. So that's a little bit about our organization. We'll get into some more details, but our website is WNorthconnect, which brings all of our members together, and now we're executing everything virtually.
Wonderful.
Wow. We were going to ask you why you concentrated on women in mid-career, but I think you've covered that reasonably well there. So let me throw a curveball at you. Do you think mid-career women have a much more difficult problem getting ahead than mid-career men? I mean, that sounds like an obvious answer, but is it that obvious?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. And, I think one of the things, and this is not all women mid-career, but there is a large majority of women who are starting families and are working parents. And one of the things that I do like to acknowledge is that I try to use the language working parents as much as possible, as opposed to just working mothers, because we have seen a cultural shift where there has been a lot more men taking an active part in their children's lives. And so I do believe there is, there needs to be support for that mid-level manager or mid-level executive professional across the board, men and women. Women definitely are disproportionately affected at that level. And we're also seeing the statistics where women are not being nurtured in that pipeline. And so the conversation comes up a lot. Well, you know, there's only 4% of women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. And that statistic kind of was the catalyst that launched me into asking the questions, well, why? And all of the statistics point to this drop off. And, you know, we're seeing it even more so right now. And I know we're going to get into that again. So in some of the other questions, but I definitely think both are affected, but definitely more women, more disproportionately.
Sure. Okay. That I can understand that.
How did the pandemic affect WNorth? Were there any adjustments that had to be made over the past year?
Lots. So a big part of our business is the conference, and we were all set to host a sold out 6th conference in the April of 2020. Oh. And so we had 200 women from across North America, many flying in, but hotels booked, everything. Oh. And in early March 2020, we had to make the difficult decision to postpone, which we initially postponed until October. But it was a few weeks or months later where it was very clear that it was we were going to go virtual. So we pivoted, that famous word right now, we pivoted to a virtual experience, and we did as much as we could to provide value for our members and for our attendees. So we actually, in about 4 weeks, created an online course. Wow. With 6 modules supporting these women, as well as the virtual conference. And then we took a whole bunch of female-founded items that we normally would do in our gift bags, and we packaged it up, and we shipped it across Canada to all of our, and the US actually, to all of our attendees. So, you know, lots of work. You know, a lot of people say, oh, it must be so much easier to do a virtual conference. I will tell them that, I will challenge them that there are many different pieces, especially if you want to try and deliver that same experience as best you can.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know we're going to get onto how people can contact you a little later in the show, but for women who are watching who would like to be a member, there's 2 questions in one here. How do people become members, and what are the qualifications for becoming a member?
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a great question. So we are looking for women who have been in a professional capacity for a minimum of 5 to 8 years, and who have visions for promotion or to grow their company in the next 5 years. So we ask, you know, a few qualifying questions, and we have applications on our website, wnorthconnect.com. And the second part of your question was what they could hope to experience. So WNorth has 2 memberships. We have our networking kind of mastermind membership, which includes access to a program that we launched almost 3 years ago virtually. And it is, I'd say, one of our signature products, and that is a gathering of 5 curated women in your group with a facilitator. And you meet every 2 weeks. And it's really an accountability and a peer mentorship opportunity. So this is all held on Zoom, and, you know, it's a really great opportunity to talk through issues that you may be having in your place of business, to talk personal issues. And it becomes, many of our members have become really great friends through this process. So that is our networking membership. We also have a digital membership, which is a more approachable price point for those who want to digest some of our workshops and online content.
Excellent.
Wow, very good.
Can you tell us about the work your team is doing to create more support structures for women in the workforce?
Yes. So I have become quite an advocate as of late for creating some systemic change with regards to traditional structures that are keeping women from staying in the workforce. And I'll give you an example. One of, especially in the last few weeks with regards to the pandemic, I'm very passionate about getting women back into the workforce. About, I'd say 20% of our members are currently not working for various reasons, whether that is childcare challenges, they have left their jobs voluntarily due to challenges, or they're just in a position where they needed to take a step back. And so what I'm really focused on right now is getting companies to adopt to ways that would bring those women back. As an example, there are very few professional jobs posted in Canada for less than 40 hours a week. Why is that? There are so many skilled women and men who may not be able to commit to that type of a full-time job. And a company that I just connected with out of the UK, RoleShare, is creating a incredible opportunity where RoleShare is a matchmaking, professional matchmaking online platform where you find somebody who has a similar skill set to you and you co-apply for positions. So many companies may be hesitant to post positions that are less than 40 hours a week because many of the targets will be, they want to be fair across all of the positions, and targets need to be, and especially maybe sales, they need to be consistent. So role sharing is something that I'm really also passionate about bringing to light in Canada. And through this company that I've recently found, they are enabling women and men to find people to co-apply for positions with them.
Now, are these remote positions then?
So many would be. I mean, a lot of their initial companies are tech companies. Tech companies traditionally adapt and adopt these types of practices earlier than the rest of, I'd say, corporate organizations. But I do believe that now with the pandemic, and even in the last 2 months where it's really come to light that remote positions are here to stay, I do really advocate for creating more flexible work structures that would be more attractive to getting women back into the workforce.
Excellent.
That's a really good idea. I'd like to look at that link. It's called Will Share, is it?
Role Share, ROLE Share.
Yes. Role Share. Okay. Excellent. Very good idea. Super. So let's ask you a personal question. How do you yourself balance motherhood and high-powered career?
So it's a great question. And, when I saw this question, I really wanted to share a story. And the story is around, the child care issues that many women have faced in Canada during the pandemic. As we all know, the daycares were closed for several months. That was an interesting time in my husband and I's lives. We have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Wow.
Who at the time were 1 and 4, and a very, very busy time. Coming into August, things were opening up. The daycares had been open for a few months, and we were starting to get into cold and flu season, closer to maybe September. My daughter got quite sick, as most 18-month-olds do, and she had snotty noses. She had all of these symptoms that, having already gone through this with my other child, I know that this is all symptomatic of what we go through when we have daycare. But she was not able to, for various symptoms, be able to go to daycare for almost 2 months.
Wow.
And so we were paying for full-time daycare, but not reaping the benefits of any of the daycare. So we ended up dialing back her daycare admission so she's in 2 days a week. We since haven't been able to get her back up to those 5 days a week. So she's with us 2 days a week. Well, my son is in kindergarten, so we have full-time care. So it's been an interesting battle, and it's just one story. That's just my story of how COVID has affected. A lot of people don't always hear those sides of the story, and you hear, well, but the daycares are open. Well, the daycares are very full, and there's no movement because there's very few activities available for many people are pulling their kids out of daycare and doing activities. So many different factors are making it extremely difficult for working families at the moment. As to the answer of how I'm handling, one day at a time. And I wake up very early sometimes. This morning, my husband and I woke up at 4 a.m. because we knew we had our daughter and we had some work. We're working towards a deadline. And so we woke up at 4 a.m. to get work done. And by 7 a.m., we had 3 hours of uninterrupted time. So you do things that you may not have done pre-pandemic to make it work.
Wow. Well done. Yeah, I'm long past those, as you can see from my age, long past those days with my kids. So I feel for you. But well done handling it. Kathleen, back to you.
Well, I think you answered my next question about the COVID, but so I'll go on and ask you what your predictions are for the future of the events industry post-COVID.
Yes, so it's a great question, and especially with virtual events, you hear the terminology like I'm zoomed out right now. There is a lot of that. Well, one of the other things I'm noticing is people are just really missing that personal connection. Some of the most popular events online right now are those ones with 5 or 6 people on the screen, so breakouts. And I think what events look like post-COVID and when we're actually safe to gather again is I think that they will be focused on smaller curated groups. We have always taken that approach with WNorth. We've always had our leadership masterminds capped at 5. We do connect dinners when it's safe to do so with maximum of 24 people, and our conference is capped at 200 people. And so, ironically, I went to a conference in San Diego about February 2020, so only a few weeks before everything shut down in Canada. And there were 7,000 people at this women's leadership conference in San Diego. Sorry, it wasn't San Diego, it was San Jose. And right in the middle of Silicon Valley. And we had heard the rumblings of what was going on in Asia, and things were starting, I was flying, but I was wearing a mask, and it was, I think I felt pretty uncomfortable having, 7,000 people in the room, but we hadn't got to that stage yet. I do think it's going to take a long time or a fair amount of time where people feel comfortable going to a convention that's, got that many people. I don't know if that's going to be everybody, but I do think that people might seek out smaller or more curated events and conferences that serve a particular demographic so that the networking is a very high quality that they're looking for.
Interesting. So we're just talking the changes to the digital world. A lot of people have difficulty networking in real time, face to face. A lot of people hate going to networking, but realize they need to. And some of those people find it even more awkward on virtual events. So what advice have you got for people who need to get into the virtual networking world?
Yeah, so it's a great question. There is an interesting statistic that I've just found recently around the virtual events right now. Only 18% of people attending virtual events go with the number one objective to network. The number one objective they go to is to learn. And when you're going to an in-person event, 72% of people go with the number one objective to network and less so to learn. So online events are actually attracting a different type of audience. And my best advice to networking online would be to very clearly identify and go to events that have an intention of networking. Make sure you know whether the event is a Zoom meeting style or a workshop where you can see other people and interact with them ideally, Or if it's a webinar, if that's likely not going to be a good use of your time. So finding out the medium in which the event is delivered is key, and also looking for those cues that show that this event is really focused on networking.
You know, that's such good information, because, and I'll just give you my opinion on this. I also own a tech company called Carry Tech Solutions. And what I found, especially in a sales position where you're trying to you know, connect with other companies and people that are in need of software development and app development, it's been very difficult to do that online, because usually the initial connection is in a cafe, having a coffee, sitting face to face with someone, and then you can have, you know, a follow-up call perhaps on Zoom. But that initial connection is, I'm finding, much more difficult in a virtual world. And I was trying to figure out, well, how do we break that barrier? How do we make that initial connection on Zoom and make it still personable? You know,
I have an answer for you. So it's called the spontaneous connection. And the best way to replicate that in a virtual space is actually through authentic introductions. So this is a practice that I try to do as much as I can, which is make 5 introductions a week. So, and others do it for me as well. So having a conversation with someone else about something that's related to Kathleen's business. So I decide to introduce you, person X over here, to Kathleen, and that even over email is a very powerful tool. And I would say that is the best replacement for that spontaneous connection that you're talking about that happens in real life. And unfortunately, it does rely on others to make that action. But if you put the offer for introductions out there, or you can also request them. So if you have a mutual friend on LinkedIn doing a little bit of digging, it's just a more powerful way of getting their attention.
excellent. Thank you.
And you being on the show is an example, because thanks to Charlotte, we met you as an introduction, and we've had, I guess, 10 or 12 guests on this show who've been introduced by other guests or publicists or something from that initial introduction. So
amazing. Well, I'll make some more introductions.
Thank you. And I think now is a good time to talk about Charlotte, who you work with, and give her a big shout out for the tremendous amount of work she puts in for her clients. So well done, Charlotte. And anyone
Charlotte, Lena Rose PR
that's
in
right.
Los Angeles.
Anyone who wants a good PR agency, get hold of Charlotte. There was something I wanted to ask you, which is not part of what we'd planned, but we've got a couple of minutes in hand. So there's actually 2 quick ones I want to ask. So that was, there's many men who don't aspire to be CEOs or senior executives, who have no hope of ever being one, who don't even want to be an entrepreneur, who are quite happy to work a 9-to-5 job, and that's their lot in life, and no one criticizes them. But it seems to be that some women tell me they feel that they're a sort of sense of letting the side down if they don't aspire to get higher, but they're quite comfortable where they are. So my comment was that I think women in that position who are happy where they are viewed through a harsher lens than men in the same circumstances. So am I on track with that observation, or am I being a little bit too harsh there?
So I don't see that as much.
Okay.
I definitely do see a group or a demographic of women who are comfortable in their roles, and there are a lot of reasons that works beautifully for a certain time in their life, and especially when you have young children. And one of the things that I want to acknowledge is, you know, when we talk about our purpose at WNorth, we definitely want to address that career success is what success looks like for you. So, you know, when we talk about this kind of upward trajectory, that doesn't always have to be C-suite. It can be a movement to entrepreneurship. It can be a movement. A lot of our programs, we talk about professional development, but we also talk about personal development. We talk about building up your wealth and investing. That is something that you could stay the course in a role that you love, but builds a nest egg for you by finding out more about investing. So there are other sort of professional/personal improvements that you can make. So not exactly answering your question, I definitely, I do think women do face criticism more than men for a number of different reasons. Mm-hmm. So what you're seeing, I'm not surprised. Okay. I do believe that there's some really positive things that come from staying the course in a role that you love. But I'm committed to always improvement. So if that's personal improvement or professional improvement.
Yeah, no, thank you. Good. And I like the way that you're approaching that with WNorth. That's great. And then, Kathleen, I have time for another quick one.
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
So, Heather, here's a question that we ask most of the successful guests we have on the show. If you were to look at the successful people you've come across in business and in life in general, men and women, is there one characteristic that stands out, that separates them from the average? Is there one thing in your mind that differentiates that?
I would say empathy, mm-hmm. and sort of understanding their people. That would be the one word.
Wow, very good. I've got to tell you that we ask a lot of people that question, and I think there's perhaps 5 or 6 characteristics that come out, and that one has come up before. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you for that. Excellent. Good advice for our audience. Yeah, that's enough from me. Back to Kathleen.
One more question, or a couple more. Tell us what is next for you and WNorth.
Yes, so we are, we're a year into the pandemic. We launched a new platform in April of 2020. Mm-hmm. So we've actually tripled the size of our membership over the last year. Wow. And so we plan to triple it once more before the end of this year. So we are growing our membership, we are growing our programs, and we are having our second cohort of that leadership course that we developed. So that's our Leadership 360 course, which we'll be running this in next month. So we are really still continuing to focus on virtual programming. Our hope is that we can return to Whistler in person for our 2022 conference in the spring of next year. So working towards that goal, and in the meantime, staying safe and staying online. So yeah, I think if anyone is interested in hearing more about our programs, wnorthconnect.com is our website.
And that is the best way for people to connect with you, is through the website then?
Yes, and if they're on Instagram, it's at wnorthconnect.com, or sorry, at WNorthConnect. And I'm also on Instagram at Heather Odendaal. And I'm happy to chat over there, and you speak with me, because we're a small group here. So I'd love to hear from you.
Right.
My goodness, it's been an absolute delight, Heather. We are out of time. So thank you so much for joining us today. We so appreciate you. And thank you all so much out there for tuning into our show. We love reading your comments, so please keep them coming. And if anyone out there, again, is interested in being a guest on the show, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Peter or myself. And until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.